Welcome to the Yuniverse. I am your host, Yan. This is episode number 36. I'm so grateful to be back here to share my understanding and my journey with all of you. So, first and foremost, who are we? Well, this question lies, are we looking from top down or from bottom up? Meaning, are we a human physical body, a human being looking up, achieving and experiencing spiritual experiences? Or are we already spiritual beings within a human body? It depends on where we look at it. Both can be equally true, and that is entirely depending on where we are looking at it from. Second of all is to understand, after examining or thinking about who we are, top down or bottom up, why we are here, why we take birth, why we are in a human incarnation. If we are already spiritual beings, why are we here on earth inside a human incarnation? One of the answers is that it is because of our desires. It is because of our attachments to sensual gratification, to physical experiences, sensual experiences, and we needed to work off or finish off a training or a curriculum that we're taking. And this work, we can call it self-work or spiritual work, or this curriculum that we're taking will not really be finished within one birth. It goes on, and the cycle of birth and death goes on and on when we continue to take birth to finish off of the curriculum. Say this trip, this lifetime, this current incarnation, we finish this piece, and that piece, X, Y, and Z. Through each incarnation, through each period of life, we purify ourselves and finish off more things that we have to work on. So the Buddha's 5 hindrances are: number 1, lust and greed; number 2, hatred, ill will; number 3, agitation; number 4, sloth and torpor, that means inertia; number 5, doubt. So if we have any of these 5 hindrances, we take birth, we are born on the physical plane. So we are born into a incarnation, and the goal of each incarnation is to work on ourselves, to purify ourselves. So until we are finished with the work, with the curriculum. As we go through the current incarnation, this current lifetime, as we continue to work on ourselves, we begin to slowly see models of realities. We begin to see a reality that we think, that we are taught, that we are surrounded by, that we are influenced from the second that we're born, from all of these reinforcements and from our parents, other people, family, relatives, teachers, professors, the whole system, to shift from thinking that what we think we are and who we think we are and who we think everybody else is, from an absolute reality to relative reality. That just like how we see and perceive who we are, is it top down, is it bottom up? It is all relative. Everything depends on where we are looking at. There isn't an absolute reality. It's all relative reality. As we work on ourselves, we begin to see through the veil, and to understand that who we think we are and who we think everybody else is only just a model of reality. It's not the model of reality. At some point in our birth, we awaken. It's the process or the journey of awakening, and we began to see this perspective shift in which we see reality is not absolute but relative. And looking from different angles and perspectives, everything is relatively true. Our physical bodies are real. Our ego, personality are real. Our psychological needs are real. Our desires, our attachments, every single thing, every single plane is real, because it all depends. Everything, it's relatively real depending on where we're looking at. And before we awaken, it's sort of like what Gurdjieff, the Russian philosopher, talked about, that we are living in the prison of the mind, that we are set in our own limitations, and we cannot see beyond the prison of our minds. The first thing to escape from the prison and to achieve or to be free is to recognize that we are in a prison. If we think that we are free, then no escape is possible. Next, to see through the veil, to begin the process of awakening. The journey of awakening is through different methods of meditation or yoga. Yoga means union, or in the Gita it means skill in action. It means an evenness of the mind. The intellectual mind is a beautiful servant but a lousy master. The practice of meditation is to quiet down the mind, is to train ourselves to be disciplined, to be one-pointed, to become more reflective instead of reactive, to be still, to be calm, to act from the heart, to act from silence instead of the busy speediness of the mind. As we quiet down the mind more, we get to open up our hearts, and we get to act and see each other as fellow beings who are also on this journey. We won't be so limited by the mind to judge, to compare, to create more separation between us. Because most things act from the mind only increases the separation, only increases the illusion of separateness, only exacerbate the suffering and strengthen the mind and the ego. The more we reinforce it, the more it goes. It's like a positive feedback loop. The more we strengthen the mind, the more we're inside the prison of the mind, the more everybody else, or the more we think that we are our minds, that we are our egos, when we are so much more. And to think and view ourselves, to identify ourselves as only the ego, as only the mind, is a very limiting condition. It's only one model of reality. It is a constant, never-ending journey to train the mind, to see where we are caught in our minds, in our desires, in our attachments to certain feelings or gratifications or achievement, that we want to collect things and achieve more so that we can psychologically feel better about ourselves as a separate entity. And the more we do this, the more separation and boundary, and the farther away we are from each other. Say, for example, the culture myth that more is better, right? That we work hard to achieve more, to get a job, to earn money, to earn more money, to buy houses and mansions and have abundance that we don't really need, but we desire, because we are sold on more is better, right? More money, more cars, more vacations, more and more. We cramp more in time, and we think that having enough money and having enough security, having the best insurance policy is going to make us feel better. It's going to fulfill us. It's going to make us sleep better at night. It's going to free us. But in fact, it sort of reinforces our separateness as an individual entity and as somebody doing something, as an achiever, that there will be more things to achieve as soon as we're done with this one. We'll have to get more, we'll have to work harder, we'll have to do more in the same amount of time so that we can beat the next guy, we can achieve more, we can be better. And this condition is acting out from the mind, because the mind can't really be fulfilled and satisfied. It has to constantly crave and create troubles and keep finding new things to reassert or to maintain its own survival. So the more we do it, the more paranoia we experience, because we're afraid we may lose it all, and we can never really get enough. We are in the illusion that we can play God, that we can have our own heaven on earth, that we can have all the things that money can buy, all the things and influences that power and respect can get us, and fame. And we want to create a little world of our own and to control it all. And this is the trap of the mind. As we continue our spiritual journey, it becomes apparent that to help we work on ourselves as an offering to free others and to free the world. Because we quiet down the mind, we get to open up the heart, we get to be here at this moment. We are present. We cultivate an environment where others can be here together, past all the dramas, past all the mind stuff, get past and to meet behind the mind and just be here together as beings, to recognize each other behind all the individual differences of body, of personality, of astral identity, and to be together as fellow beings. We also get to work with the sufferings, the pain, the experiences in our life as a vehicle for awakening. Because behind it all, behind the melodrama, behind the storylines we have of ourselves, behind it all, here we are. We're not going anywhere. We're never born and we'll never die. We begin to accept everything as is. We do not have any resistance to what is. We accept whatever it is. Because behind all the dramas and storylines that we tell ourselves, here we are. The spiritual journey is also like a roller coaster ride. One moment we're up, we're high, we're holy. The next moment we come down, we're depressed. We think that we have lost it, that we have fallen off from the path. But the truth is that once we have awakened, we can't really go back to sleep. Once we have see through the veil within a birth, in the middle of an incarnation, everything, every meaning, every experience from that moment becomes interesting, becomes a completely different journey. We began to awaken out of a dream, out of our identification as a separate individual, as a separate entity doing something. We began to realize that we are here to purify ourselves, to work on ourselves, to be. That life situations come and go, but life is here and now, at this moment. It's not going anywhere. And most people confuse their life situations with their life, which isn't really their fault. It's because they're so identified with their minds. It's that mistaken identity that they are exclusively identified with their results, with the outcomes, with what they think they know, with their minds, and couldn't really awaken enough to see through behind the veil and to kind of look at the gestalt, the totality of things, to see ourselves from a different point of view, to gain a different perspective and understand that everything is all relative, and to be trapped in any single place, any single relative reality, to only think that our minds and the physical body is real and everything else is false and doesn't exist, creates a massive vulnerability to be free. And it sort of just reinforces the suffering, the separateness, the clinging of the mind to prefer one thing over another, to have preferences. The first line from the Zen Chinese, the third book of Patriarchs says, "The great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences." When we prefer something over another, we cling on to the highs, the goods, the better, over the downs, the lows, the worst. That is again our resistance to what is. It's quite impossible and difficult to speak about the unspeakable, to really describe and to put everything into language and in words, because the truth we can only be the truth and not really talk about it. Any kind of labels or any description or any ideas, any concept is very, very limiting, because our minds, the human minds, think about things. And for any phenomenon, for any reality that's not in time or in space, is not considered a thing. So our minds can only understand and perceive and talk about so much. And there is a realm or a place, a locus that is way beyond language to be able to express, that we can only really be and experience it. It's also not an experience, because that is where the language falls short, and it just becomes a limiting concept, because an experience has a experiencer and the experience, and this creates the subject-object relationship of dualism. One of the keys is to rest between dualism and non-dualism, in which we recognize that it's all relative. It's the paradoxes of life. It's nothing and yet it's everything. It's silence, yet there is sounds. It's an experience, yet there isn't an experiencer. It's to go beyond, it's to be able to live in duality, but understand and see the world and each other as one. To not push away the duality of separateness, but to also acknowledge it all as oneness. So the statement, there isn't anybody doing anything because there is nobody, because we're not really who we think we are. We tend to think all of our lives that there is somebody doing something, achieving something, somebody as a separate entity, as a separate individual with a name and form. But from another point of view, there isn't actually anybody doing anything. Everything is just the way it is. It's just being done. It's the Tao, T-A-O. In the mystic literature, it says that there is nowhere to stand. Meaning, if we are standing in our divinity and pushing away our humanity, that we think that we are all gods, that we are spirit, we are light, we are love, we are presence, then we don't really know our zip codes. And if we live in our humanity and pushing away our divinity, then we're stuck in our minds, and we think we're our physical body in this name and form with our personality, psychological needs. It becomes vulnerable to stand anywhere, so it's best to think of it all as relative and to keep it together, so to speak, and to live in the world but not of the world. To know that we are also in roles, in forms, and we have our psychosocial roles, that we are a learner, we are a student, we are a professor, we are a mother, a father, a son, a brother, a sibling, a sister, a friend. We are all of these things, and it's not to only exclusively identify with the roles, but to be within, to play within the roles, and see that we are all here behind it all. Once we get a better understanding of ourselves, our models of reality, and to see everything as relative depending on where we're looking at, death is really not as scary as we make it to be. We think when we die, we annihilate and we extinguish, but that's not really who we are. But that is only if we identify ourselves with our mind, with our physical body, with our psychosocial identity. So the real death is the death of the self, the death of the ego. We think that we exist, or we think that we are real, so the death becomes the hardest part, the most difficult part of the trip, of the journey, if we think of it like that. But looking at it from another point of view, that we are spiritual beings, that we are here, we take birth to finish off certain work, to purify ourselves more, to quiet down more, to not cling, and to not be attached to any experience, any kind of desires. And for the ego, being wrong or being proven incorrect, being lost or failing or experiencing setbacks, it's the ultimate death for the ego, and the ego cannot stand to die like that or to be annihilated. So it's doing everything to protect itself. It has its own unique, very strong defense mechanisms that we don't even know that it's activating. So when we get past this fear of death, of being wrong, of leaving the physical world behind because we think that is the end, is also an illusion, and it's keeping us from being free. The Bhagavad Gita, one of the most studied texts in the Eastern philosophy, illustrates that death is like taking off an old coat and we put on a new one, a fresh coat, when we take another birth. Because we are not really going anywhere. We are really part of the one, the oneness, There's many names for it: God, love, presence, awareness, the collective consciousness that we take birth within our separateness to work on ourselves, to sort of awaken out of our dreams, to recognize ourselves within the multiplicity of forms. Imagine we're all within this curriculum and we are all in the 4th grade. We are working on purifying ourselves and to finish our work for the 4th grade so that we can move on to the 5th grade. And when somebody dies young or early, or there's been an accident, we say, oh no, that's awful, that's horrible, and we cling to the idea of them. We have a certain model of reality of how long people should live, but from another point of view, possibly maybe that being has already finished his or her work on the 4th grade and it's already moving on to the 5th grade. His or her work is done at the 4th grade level and they are ready to move on. They are also not going anywhere. They're still here. They're just in a different form, and they'll come back again, they'll take birth, and they will continue to work on themselves, to purify themselves, and to finish their work for the 5th grade. The nature of suffering is the clinging of mind, the Buddha says. The nature of suffering is the clinging of mind. Is when we cling to this model of reality, when we cling to this experience or that experience, when we have attachments to preferences, to any sort of sensory, physical experiences. And anything that reinforces our clinginess, our clinging of the mind, exacerbate the suffering. But whose suffering is it? Is it theirs or is it ours? If we are all one, then it's actually our suffering, and this is coming from we can only see this when we identify ourselves as a 4th chakra beings, when we see the unitive nature of all things and all beings. This is the quote, the statement, out of emptiness arises compassion. It is to see the suffering of the world, is to see the suffering of others as our own, because it's all one. And there isn't actually a them and us. The separation is part of the illusion. And to see the world and others beings from this level is also relatively true. So to work on ourselves, to relieve suffering of ourselves and of others, is actually a compassionate act to relieve more suffering, because until everybody makes it, nobody makes it. Until everybody awakens and purify themselves and awaken out of the illusion of separateness of themselves of exclusively identify themselves as a separate entity, a separate individual. Nobody really goes anywhere. So we raise ourselves, we work on ourselves, we purify ourselves as an offering to help others, and also an offering to the world. Because when we express gratitude, love, positivity, joy, when we spread more of this light and energy in the world, it reflects the universe being kind, being positive and loving, go past behind all the individual differences and all the drama, the melodramas that we have created, to see each other as brothers and sisters on the journey of awakening. I am profoundly grateful to be here with all of you. Let's continue to work on ourselves, to purify ourselves, to keep going, to be still, and to be calm in the midst of chaos, to quiet down more and to act more from the heart.